So with the new Blu-ray came a lot of big fixes, especially for the Sukuna vs Mahoraga fight. From fixing unfinished, choppy animation, compositing changes to entirely redoing cuts, and most of all, a stack of new fight sequences. Now there's a few million things to go over, so I'm going to stick purely to just breaking down the new scenes added. So yeah, in the original TV version, as Mahoraga's arm is zipping through the air, out of nowhere he gets kicked back. The cut is so fast, you don't even know what's happened unless you go like frame by frame. And it seems it was a cut from a completely separate scene, like jammed in. And then he's like out of nowhere picked up part of it, or another building, but it's in a different location now. Who knows, it's pretty disjointed. However, that's now removed entirely. In the Blu-ray version, after the arm flick, you actually see Mahoraga launch at Sukuna. There's then a background transition, and the two have this like dramatic stare down. And cool animation is one thing, but how it's framed is just as important. And this 100% is well done. The high angle shot of Mahoraga towering over really gives a strong feeling of power to the character, especially with how the next cut it shows this tiny Sukuna then like pans up to this monster looking down. Then there's the low angle shot of Sukuna sort of bowed down. It's all meant to make Mahoraga visually feel imposing as possible and build tension. At the same time, the black shading is a clever way to hide Sukuna's own intentions, which adds to the suspense. And then it just like explodes into this frenetic hand-to-hand combat, choreographed by Whelin Zhang, and animated by Nakakoji and a small bit by this season's director Gosei himself. And the staff get completely wild with the designs. Now in season 1 you had another very idiosyncratic animator, Keiichiro Watanabe, behind some of the top action scenes in that season, who would deviate from the model sheets and completely break limbs, distort and exaggerate the drawings to achieve a more looser movement to actions. So this isn't a first in the series, but many of the animators here, there's literally 15 that have a part in this, so speaking in general terms, alter the designs heavily to achieve this bouncy, fluid type of motion. And you can notice as the fight gets more intense, the staff progressively distort the designs more and more. First, it's by removing a lot of the line work, so it's just like these blocks of color at one point. Then in one cut, Sukuna's face is there and everything else, but then as the speed increases, Gosei leaves out a lot of the facial details and Sukuna's body gets more deformed. And then as he spins around after being knocked back, Sukuna becomes this abstract collection of these intense painterly brushstrokes and sketchy lines, which gradually get more and more chaotic to the point Sukuna's face is just like covered in them. It looks genuinely terrifying, and considering this is Sukuna, it couldn't work better. The animator behind it, Ruai, took a similar approach as well in an earlier episode, switching from these on-model drawings to these rough, sketchy lines and whited out eyes for the impact. And what's even crazier is that Ruai is just like a college student who entered the anime industry like last year. Although, despite being a new name, it's clear he has some old school influences with those loose, wobbly lines, most likely inspired by Shinya Ohira. Even in some recent fan art, Ruai seems to be channeling him. Back to this episode though, Mahoraga's design also becomes more abstract. The shading is simplified and has been swapped out for black with these distorted lines. Even the background takes on this warped look. Then Sukuna spins, and once again, like everything here, there's that very bouncy, loose quality to it. From how Ruai animates the hair to the clothing, it's kind of hard to put into words, but take this cut as an example. The hair is drawn with these very clear, segmented, spiky shapes, and that's sort of how it moves. Whereas Ruai treats it more like real hair. It's drawn with these thin, wispy lines and bounces around in a very organic way. And that doesn't make the first example bad whatsoever because it's less realistic, but it's more so just to show why this cut feels different from the norm. Anyways, Gosei Oda shows up for a quick cut. Energetic as always, it feels like such a rarity to see him work on something action related these days. If you're not familiar with him, he animated the part between the Titan Dude and Saitama, and did a load of action work on that series, but after One Punch Man, it became pretty infrequent, so again, nice to see. Anyway, somehow the animation gets even more dense with this excellent bit of hand-to-hand combat by Zhang himself. He is certainly not new to fast-paced and detailed choreographed fights, and pulls this cut off really well. And also I missed it the first time, but Sukuna grabs onto the captain's ship wheel thing, and lifts Mahoraga up into the sky with him frantically trying to escape. I'm unsure why they all suddenly appear in a subway, that's a bit of a random cutaway, but it leads to a big hit being landed with surprisingly a still used, with then a black and white color scheme being laid over to express the impact. Also animated by Nakaya Onsen, who did the insane action bit between Fushiguro and his old man. But that brings us to the end of part 1, now to the second most impressive bit of new action next to that scene. And first up is Julian Bentley. Feels good to talk about him again. He puts out some very dynamic poses mixed with some great background animation, although it's the composition choice to like flip the entire screen that honestly is the most distinct for me. And then up next we have the debut of the legendary Austrian animator Bahi JD. Or well, I guess proper debut. He did work on season 1's second opening, but never actually animated directly on a JJK episode until now, after the season's finished. I mean, yeah, if the staff list for this episode wasn't already stacked, from Space Dandy to One Punch Man to then One Piece, the guy's worked on the biggest and the best, and now brings his expressive style to this series as well. Now first off, very complex work, from having to animate all the buildings and various structures, but to then also swing the camera around them, while also drawing from these low angles. It's crazy how easy he makes it look, but it gives such a strong three-dimensional feeling to the fight. There's also a lot of strength behind the character movements, like the light pole swing and the pillar chuck. It all flows very nice. Bahi also posted his rough animation for this scene, which gives an interesting behind the scenes look at how he actually put it all together. And then after that is Julian again, and then Go with his detailed effects animation. Now outside that, there was a lot of other little new additions, but honestly just wanted to touch on the main stuff for the sake of brevity. But yeah, this is a very unusual case. Seeing corrections and minor alterations for a Blu-ray release definitely isn't new, but bringing multiple animators back, and entirely new ones in some case, either to completely redo or create new work, is not something you see every day, and is just one of the many examples of how chaotic this season's production was and how abysmal Mappa's higher-ups have handled this series. Absolute respect though for those who actually had to make this episode, literally the industry's best. But with that, thank you to my Patreons, and I'll see you later.